stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Yo, no, I ain't the type to give up. If I do something, man, I do it till I get what I want. I turn a business out of nothing into something I love. I got a poker face, but honestly, I'm not one to bluff. I flip a switch, never miss, man, I always stay up. Don't let them see you, bitch, always have a plan to stay tough. This life ahead of you ain't easy, it was built to be rough. But that's what makes a personality, is tragedy, bruh. So keep your head on your shoulders. Now we ain't out here moving rocks, we out here moving boulders. Now we ain't getting posterized, we out here making posters. And we ain't got nothing to hide, we move forward like soldiers. You better wake up for the pay stub, or you'll pay up. Don't make love to the game, bruh, fuck the game up. Change up, rearrange stuff to your greatness. Famous for the way up, play the game, bruh.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top, yeah.
You know I'm always honest, there ain't no way I'm ever stopping.
I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top,
I'm always flirting with pain, she like to hurt me and maim. I'm always working to change, but she's still lurking the same. I keep on building a dynasty while the haters be trying me. But they hate from inside, you see, hate themselves in society. So I let them speak quietly while my actions speak wider. See, they be hiding in privacy with the screen. Oh, the irony to hate someone who's trying to be whatever they would like to be. We all feel the anxiety, we make our own rivalries. Yo, so where is all the positivity? I feel like we all just hate on everything, it's killing me. Thoughts build quick, causing different possibilities. Negative thoughts will cause different disabilities. So do better, work hard under pressure. If you got no time, work smarter than ever. Don't ever let them tell you that you can't ever say never. And turn your mind into the truest of go-getters.
Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top, yeah.
You know I'm always honest, there ain't no way I'm ever stopping.
I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top, yeah. Never stop, I'll get it if I want it. Gotta make to myself a promise.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown, and I'm joined by the lovely Thor Nystrom. Today, we're going to talk about the 2023 Senior Bowl, recapping all the action from the week, practices, and we're going to be joined by a special guest, Danny Kelly from The Ringer, here in a little bit. But Thor, my dude, what's up?
Not a lot. It only took you 3 days, but you finally gave me a compliment. I'll take it, even if it's at the start of the stream. But it's been a great week here in Mobile. Just finished up the last day of practices. We have plenty to talk about. I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely, man. And so before we kind of start rolling through players, I want to let everybody out there know, look, the 2023 NFL Draft Guide is live on FantasyPros.com, and we got you covered with all things related to college football prospects and the NFL Draft. To access all of this amazing 2023 NFL Draft Guide content, all you need to do is sign up for a premium Fantasy Pros subscription. We're going to have more content dropping in the weeks and days to come, and we're going to be publishing all this before the 2023 NFL Draft. So keep checking back for FantasyPros.com for all the latest news and the updates with that. But Thor, I know before we get into risers and fallers and before Daniel Kelly gets here, I want to hit off a few topics that really, since the media breakfast, things that have kind of just come up out of the blue that I really think need to be discussed here. For the first one being Tyjae Spears weighing in at the Senior Bowl at 204, man. I know you talked to Tyjae at the podium and got the lowdown on what's going on with his weight.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I mean, it was one of the first surprises here in Mobile when you saw, you start seeing the measurements come in, and when Tyjae weighed in at 204, it opened your eyes. He was never listed at even 200 pounds at Tulane. I think it was 190 the season before, and this past year he was listed at 195. He told us that he had gained 2 pounds he played the USC game at 197, And then over the last 4 weeks of training, pre-draft training, he gained the other 7 pounds to get to 204. That was one thing, because obviously one big question on his evaluation was built kind of slight. He's 20 pounds beneath the size threshold if he's going to weigh in at 190 or whatever. But you get real close to it at 204, and then you're wondering, can he retain the movement? Specifically with him, the explosion that we saw in film. And he absolutely answered all of those questions. He was one of the best, probably the best moving running back out there on the field. He was the best running back, period. But the extra weight did not hinder his movement whatsoever. We'll talk about him more later in the episode, but definitely a big winner from this week.
Oh, absolutely. And staying on the weight conversation, I know you talked to the mauling Cody Mouch that's down here. What do you have to update us on how he put on a lot of weight over the last 2 different seasons, but he's looked like a beast down here in Mobile. What's the update on him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's probably the best personality in the entire draft. I mean, you can't go wrong with the guy. You got the long flowing red hair. You have the gap tooth smile and a big personality. He was the guy that had all the first down celebrations in Fargo. And he came down here and he acquitted himself pretty well. Certainly did at the media breakfast on Wednesday when he was charming all of us at his podium session. But also in practice, the thing that jumps off the field or the tape, if you're watching him on the screen, is the movement skills. He's a guy that gained 85 pounds at NDSU after walking on as a tight end. And he did, we're talking about it with Spears, but with Mouch, obviously, a far bigger example of that at scale. And he still moves like he's just a big tight end. And in fact, he moves better than a couple tight ends in this class. And you see that, as far as the zone stuff, getting to the outside shoulder of his man, getting out to the second level, picking off linebackers and stuff like that. The things that he struggles with right now, it's power. He still is a little bit thin in the lower side, and I don't think it's ever going to flesh out because his body probably is not made to hold 300 plus pounds. He's one of those guys after his retirement, he's probably going to shrink back down to 230 pounds or whatever real quick. But the power is probably always going to be somewhat of an issue. And then it was technique stuff on the outside as well, because he's still learning the position. I think he's headed to the inside in the NFL. One thing I heard down here, little scuttlebutt, some teams are thinking about him potentially trying him out at center, or at least doing the thought experiment of, could Cody Mouch handle center? We already knew that guard was in play, and is probably something where the majority of teams are leaning right now when they're thinking about him. But I had not heard the center thing. That's something that came up in Mobile. Will be interesting to see about that. But very few NFL centers will move as well as Cody Mouch. It's just he's got to keep learning the position, keep getting the technique down, and then the play strength thing, just something he's going to have to work around his whole career.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you talked about the end zone celebrations. I thought it was really awesome today that every time they scored a touchdown in red zone drills, they handed the ball to Mouch, and he was the first person, like Gronk, spiking it into the ground, dude. So you love to see it. But last guy I want to bring up here is Evan Hull. So Mike Mayer, NFL insider Mike Mayer, and I talked to Evan Hull at the media breakfast, and we both have been discussing this all week. Evan Hull said that he's going to go to the combine and run a 4.4. What are your thoughts on that, man? Because look, my spider sense is tingling about Evan Hull. So if I hear 4.4, I'm livid, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think more people should have picked up on by now. Like Evan Hull got, and you and me had talked about this because Evan Hull was a guy for both of us that we like more than consensus coming into this week. So obviously we had our eyes closer on him or whatever. But when you looked around at people's like scouting reports of Evan Hull coming into the Senior Bowl, there was a lot of sort of stray shot his way of like, we're expecting him to run in the 4.6s. I don't know where people get that outside of surface level things, I guess. Evan Hull was a track star in high school, and speed does not seem to be an issue for him. Certainly movement's not. He's an explosive guy. You and I talked about one of our favorite traits about him. It's the acceleration from a standstill or out of cuts. That stuff is, and you saw it on the field all week. It's something that was apparent on his tape. You also saw it on tape, but the speed, that's the thing that other people were questioning. Do I think, is he a sprinter? Like a world-class sprinter? No. But like, I always assumed he was going to run in the 4.5s. And the fact that he told y'all at that breakfast that he expects to run in the 4.4s, I wouldn't put that past him either. The 4.6 stuff was baloney.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, look, you know my love for Evan Hull, and I said, look, this guy's going to be a 4 or 5 guy. So to hear him at the breakfast confidently saying he's going to be in the 4-4s really perked my ears up. So after all of this news and scuttlebutt and all the things that we've been talking about in Mobile, we're also going to we have to hit the risers and fallers, players that really have helped or hurt their stock for the NFL draft coming into this week. And I mean, Thor, just rolling down positions, man, the first guy I want to bring up here has to be Jake Haener. We've been talking about him all week. We've been talking about, look, like the bar is set really low at quarterback this week, but Jake Haener has looked like the best guy out here from start to finish. But what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, well, we got to add some context here. Just sort of like I added with the Evan Hall thing of like, people expect him to run in the 4.6s, but he thinks he's going to run in the 4.4s, and there's reason to think that he could. We also have to bake in some context as far as the quarterback situation goes. It's a fact. Jake Haener was heads and shoulders above the other quarterbacks that were on the field. Hendon Hooker's here, but was not on the field because of his injury. But of the 6 quarterbacks that we saw on the field, Jake Haener was head and shoulders above the rest of them this week. But the context of the other part of it is the quarterback crop was not very good in Mobile this year. Very low bar for Jake to jump over. It was just slightly off of the ground. There was inconsistencies from some of the guys that were talented. There was some guys that just flat out had just awful weeks. And then there was other guys that just sort of like Clayton Tune would be an example of a guy that I think just hit the ball down the fairway. He didn't prove anything he didn't answer any of the questions that we had about his evaluation, but he also was more or less efficient, almost in an annoying way at sometimes, because he would just check down immediately when his primary option downfield wasn't there, which drew some grumbles from the crowd. But he was more of a hit it down the fairway guy. Jake Haener was the one guy where he came in. I think he impressed everyone just by being the best one on the field. But I think he also proved some stuff to everybody, no matter what level on Haener they came into the week. I was mentioning my write-up yesterday. When we arrived at the Senior Bowl last year, one of the very first things that popped out to us was like looking down on the field. Bailey Zappi looks a little bit bigger than we thought he was going to be. And his arm is more live than we thought it was going to be. Like, especially in person, you could see Zappi getting RPMs on the ball that maybe on film you didn't think you saw as much. Haener, I'm not going to put him completely in that phylum of like, because Zappi, it really opened my eyes. I was like, wow, I didn't think his arm was that strong, whatever. But Haener's very clearly is stronger than we've been led to believe, and that maybe we saw on tape with some of the different throws that are in the scheme of Fresno State. He does have an NFL caliber arm. Is it a howitzer? No. And when it goes beyond 20, 25 yards downfield, he's got to start throwing his entire body into it. But he gets sufficient mustard on the ball within 20 yards. And that's I think that's the most important thing, because he thinks super fast too, that the decisions are just, bang, 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 bang. He knows how to run the system, whatever system he's in. He's obviously a leader as well. When you have the decisions coming like this, and then you can get the ball out quick and you can get, you're not going to float it out there where the defensive back can jump it. I think he went out there and he proved those things, checked the boxes, but also answered some questions that we had about his arm strength.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, with Haener, what really stuck with me was yesterday's practice whenever he hit a go ball on the perimeter, and it wasn't for a completion, but it was a perfect ball by him. And then he had another bootleg out maybe 2-3 plays later, and really you saw him throwing on the run. He wasn't able to set his base, and I was surprised with the zip and the mustard that he put on the ball. So it's good things to see, but continuing the quarterback discussion, we got to welcome in Daniel Kelly from The Ringer, get his thoughts on these guys, because look, Danny has been doing the prospect game for a long time. Love his prospect work as well. Danny, what's up? Welcome to the show.
What's up, Danny?
Hey, guys. How's it going? Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, man. I mean, we're spreading love for Jake Haener on the show here, although he's probably still not going to go higher than probably round 5 in the NFL draft. But staying on the risers here, we gave some love to Haener. Is there any other quarterbacks that we got to hit on for risers before we move on to the running backs?
I mean, can I say no? I would say
no. That's exactly the answer I was looking for, Danny. Thank you.
That is correct.
Thank you. You are simpatico here, my friend.
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't. to be honest, I didn't like closely watch these guys because I think like the word on the street is this is going to be like fourth, fifth, sixth rounders at
Yep.
best, and so I was like focusing my energy on some other guys. But like I did not seem to. I didn't really notice any guys like stepping up. The guy out of Shepherd that everybody was kind of excited about. I didn't think he was all that impressive. Jaren Hall was a little bit disappointing. I mean, he definitely can like. I think he could rise in the process because he's probably going to test well at the combine, and he's like, you know what I mean? Like he's got the running ability, and he had some good stats at BYU. But I don't know. To me, none of these guys really stood out. None of them certainly like rose a lot. I think in the opinion of NFL evaluators. So I would say nope, not really.
Yeah, and
no disagreement.
Yeah, Jaren Hall, you might have undersold it a little bit, Danny. He was one of the most disappointing players on the field, regardless of position this week. And you mentioned the tools. He's a super athletic kid. He has a really good arm. You want to talk about juice in the arm. He's got that. And the former baseball player, he's one of those guys who can run or throw on the run, and he can throw it from various platforms. We see this all the time with the former shortstops. You remember Anthony Gordon from a couple years ago, and unfortunately, RIP Anthony Gordon, he didn't end up making it. But through from all the different arm angles, he was a former baseball player. We see this over and over again. He has that stuff going for him. And he has the pedigree and stuff like he comes from this family of athletes and all this sort of stuff. But like so many inconsistencies on tape. When his best players were off the field, his game always went down. When Puka Nacua was injured beginning of last year, and then Gunnar Romney was injured as well, he was not nearly as effective as when he had those weapons out there. His situation started to crater. And then he started to struggle under pressure. And then you have this make good opportunity here in Mobile this week. You want him to come out and show those tools, and then show also that you're a little bit more consistent, that play to play, rep to rep than we saw in film. We didn't see that at all. We saw bad decision making. We saw errancy with the arm. He'd miss left. He'd miss right. He'd miss over the guy's head. Then he'd start short arming the ball. It seemed like he would get in his own head as well. So I thought he was a big time loser this week.
I thought, and I agree. Like, I think there was a couple plays he made on day one where he was throwing to Nacua, and like you could see the connection there. And he made a couple of nice throws to them. But then, of course, he didn't play day two, and I didn't see him out there today either. But so, yeah, I mean, it was disappointing. And honestly, like watching some of the offense today and this week, it's been kind of – I'm wondering how frustrated some of the coaches were because they just couldn't run the stuff that they were wanting to run. Like there was just a lot of overthrows, a lot of wild throws, a lot of like guys just sitting in the pocket and then bailing out because they couldn't see anything coming open. There was definitely moments that the offense has had, but it felt like the defenses kind of got the best of them in the practices that I was watching. So, yeah, I would say the quarterback play was definitely not unexpectedly, but it was bad.
And Danny, your point's super well taken. The grumbling in the crowd was heavy, hot and heavy at a couple of times here because like the receiving core, the class here in Mobile. There's some attractive names there and guys that we want to see, downfield. And then the defensive backs, it's a pretty good crop here as well. But those guys weren't getting the opportunities for the reps because of what you're talking about. Guys would miss, then guys would start checking down, then guys would get in their own head and stuff like that. We just didn't get to see the plays progress.
Well, Thor, absolutely. I mean, let's keep it real here. I mean, in the crowd, we were all like, all we want. I mean, I might walk on the field and pay somebody. Just throw it farther than 7 yards down the field. That's all I'm asking.
Give your guy a rep.
That's not a lot, is it? Right?
Yeah. Stop chucking down. Stop chucking down. This is not a game. This is an exhibition. Give your guys work. Stop chucking down.
Well, NFL evaluators are not going to like rise you up their board or drop you based off of two things you're doing in 7-on-7s, taking off running and throwing checkdowns. Like all you're doing is hurting yourself. Like grip it and rip it. Try to throw the ball down the field. Like we were all pining for that in the stands, and we didn't see it hardly at all. But I mean, Danny, I think your ideas on this are the same. Like it was just check down city for most of the week, right?
Yeah, it's just hard to watch. It's a little bit boring. I mean, I know that the quarterbacks don't want to turn the ball over because that ultimately looks worse, but it just didn't feel like the offensive like units were really doing what they wanted to do most of the time.
Yeah, and look, I can't stay any longer on this underperforming quarterback class. I mean, there's nothing else I need to sit here and say about them. So let's kind of open this up to some more exciting players. So my and Thor's love for Evan Hull has been very apparent all week, man. But Danny, we have not talked to you about Evan Hall even off air. What were your thoughts on him? Like, would you consider him to be a riser this week?
I mean, absolutely. Because, and to be totally honest, he wasn't like high on my radar. I was talking to Thor about this today. I'm like, he wasn't really a guy that I was coming here looking to watch. But he definitely like flashed in my mind. Like he's just really quick. He's built like a brick. You know what I mean? He was contributing in the passing game. He just kind of did it all, and he was definitely a pleasant surprise for someone like me who I didn't like. I wasn't coming in looking to like watch him and necessarily like keep my eye on him. And he was one of the running backs that definitely I think stood out. So he probably helped himself in that a lot. Just put his name on the radar, putting his name up there with guys like Kenny McIntosh and Roschon Johnson, Eric Gray. Those were the guys I was really looking forward to watching, and I think he definitely like acquitted himself well and looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hall did everything he needed to do. He checked a bunch of boxes. Thor, any other love letter that you want to spill on Evan Hall before we kind of move on to another guy that I know has been high, maybe the top of your list for the week? But any more love on Hall?
Yeah, just hold on, and I'll get to him in 1 second. my love, Tyjae Spears. But with Hall like coming in, most people had the idea of how skilled he was in the receiving game. And D-Bro, you and I had talked about that. It's not just out of the backfield. They also, Northwestern, lined him up in the slot a bunch. They would line him up out wide. Yep. That stuff we knew was going to be there. And he flashed that receiving ability all week long. The stuff that I think started to open some people's eyes, it was with the running aspect of it. Like, so, when you would look around at like comps around the industry, one I saw a decent bid for him, which I didn't totally agree with, was James White. And what you like, what you like about that comp is it's at least recognizing what a good receiver he is. But like the rest of their games are not similar at all. And James White's not even the same kind of receiving back that Hall is. Hall, I think, can handle usage as a runner in the NFL. Like, and I don't think like as a get you over pitch. Like, I think he can be like the 1B guy, if it's going to be like that, or maybe even for a small part of his career, he could be leading, he could be the 1A to the 1B. But Danny, the things that you brought up about his game, those are the things that I think shine through with him as a runner. He's reliable. He has really good vision. You mentioned how he's built. He's just like sort of like a ball of muscle kind of a guy.
Yeah,
and
seriously.
The acceleration's ridiculous. He's one of those backs that cuts. And some of those backs with the one cut, they'll slow down. He doesn't slow down at all. And then the other thing you'll see is he can bounce it outside and take the outside because his lateral agility and the short area burst is so good. So like, and he's used to running behind offensive lines outside of Peter Skoronski that are not opening up holes for him. And further right. are a lot of times, he's being confronted with guys in the backfield. He's used to, detecting danger really quickly and then coming up with another plan and, getting flat down the line. Now we're going to try to jet around the edge. And we saw him multiple times this week able to do that. He's a guy that will both be able to run inside and then outside the tackles as well. Super undervalued.
Yeah, I'm a huge Evan Hall fan, so nothing moved the needle on that one. But we have to talk about a real big needle mover here. I'm going to bury the lead here. I'm not going to let Thor take the lead off on this one because we've heard everything. If you've been reading the work on FantasyPros.com, you know how Thor feels about Tyjae Spears. But moving the conversation over to Tyjae Spears, Danny, would you consider him to be a riser or a faller this week?
Oh, that was easy. A riser, yeah. He was the kind of guy that I think he came in and people were expecting him to be 190 something, and he measured in at 204. So that was definitely a good sign. Like he won at the weigh-in already, and then he was the type of player. Like honestly, in these types of situations, a lot of the time, like you can't like glean a whole lot from the running backs because they're not tackling, they're not hitting. It's sort of they're doing the installs and things like that, but like it's harder to see exactly what you get from a running back. But he at the same time was like busting off like big long like touchdown runs on like every practice, and so I would say he was like one of the stars of the week in terms of like his ability to create big plays. There's a viral route that he ran where he basically like ran a little whip route over the middle of the field or like a two-way go and totally just like I don't even know how he did it. He like ducked his head under the guy and like turned the other direction and got wide open. So his receiving skills were on display there. But obviously, I think the big thing is just like quickness, explosiveness, and then body flexibility. Basically, his ability to like, elude tacklers and like cut on a dime and things like that. It was all very apparent. So in my mind, especially, he's a huge riser because again, like I just have a hard time with running backs that are like 190 pounds, 195 pounds. Like to me, it's just like that doesn't really translate most of the time. So him coming in being 204. And it sounds like he might still put on a little bit more weight before like the NFL draft and things like that. So, I think he made a lot of money for himself this week just because of those things. He showed that he could be like an NFL running back for sure.
1,000%.
Absolutely.
And, there's a part of it, prospects coming in and we have their strengths or weaknesses. A part of it is just sort of, proving the concept of the strengths. Like that's a part of what you're trying to do here. The other part of it is you're trying to answer that weaknesses thing and maybe even cross them off the list. With Tyjae, we'll go through them. Too small, 190, 195, whatever. Like you said, he comes in, weighs 204. Looks like he can add easily the 6 pounds to get up to the size threshold, the 210. I'd expect him to be somewhere around there for the combine. Keeps the movement skills at the bigger size, which would have been the next question. So now you got 2 of those questions crossed off. People question his third down utility. Can the guy pass block it all? And can he receive it all? Because that wasn't as, part of Tulane stuff as much, throwing him the ball or whatever. He shocked me with how smooth he was as a receiver. I don't know that I remember him dropping a ball all week. I mean, I'm sure it happened at some point, but like all the other running backs in my head, I can like with Chase Brown, I can think of like 8 times when he dropped the ball. But like with the other guys, I can think, 1 or 2 reps where they dropped the ball. Tyjae was so smooth with that. And also the route running. Danny, you mentioned that, the moment today that drew the most oohs and ahs. It was that one where Tyjae just, deked that guy out of his cleats on that one. And then the other one is Payne Durham in the back of the end zone when Haener hit him back there, and he had that really crazy catch in traffic between 2 guys or whatever. But the receiving skill of Tyjae Spears, which previously was sort of lying dormant, he has now sort of started to answer that question as well. At least it's not like it's not in bold as the weakness, and you might even start taking it off as sort of like a contextual problem and not something that's endemic to his game. He had a huge week. He's one of the biggest winners from this entire week, regardless of position.
Yeah, I agree.
If you look at him, like if you look at his skill set, I could see him like jumping, like leapfrogging over a handful of more just sort of generic plodding type running backs because he has that explosiveness. And if he can play on all 3 downs, like teams are just going to prioritize that over, just a guy that's like going to come in and do one job essentially. So absolutely, I liked him a lot.
Well, and while we've given a lot of love to that route that he ran today, I mean, he sent that linebacker, that corner, whoever was guarding him and that drill into the freaking shadow realm. Like he goes, whoop, and goes the other way, catches the ball and rumbles down the field. And we're just like, wow. So yeah, I think Tyjae Spears had a fantastic week. I mean, I walked into this week with like a really light comp for him. I'm walking out of the week where he looks like Michael Carter with a jetpack. That's basically where I'm looking at with him because the size is really similar. Movement skills, the ability to create yards after the ball is in his hands was absolutely fantastic. Now, moving over to another guy that, Thor, we didn't get to see a lot of. Now, I know we talked about his name earlier in the week, but Roschon Johnson, I mean, are we going to list him amongst the risers here? Because the limited time we saw him, he looked good in pass protection. He looked good and powerful on his runs. He looked like a freaking unit. I mean, would you classify him as a riser for the week, even though he did break his hand and had to leave early from Senior Bowl?
I'm curious Danny's take on this. I would put like stock, like hold, stay the same basically. Okay. Like he came in, he looked great. He like you said, he looks like a unit, very clearly in shape as well. What I wanted to see is, he was in such a unique circumstance in college where he's playing behind this demigod of a prospect at Bijan Robinson. And whenever he got on the field, Roschon, it was against these gas defenses, and then, power's obviously a big part of his game or whatever. And, he'd do the one cut thing. He might break a tackle, might make one guy miss, and then he'd be rumbling downfield. But you'd be wondering, man, like this is the third quarter and these guys are all gas, et cetera. Like, on an even playing field, how would he be? And then how does that translate to the NFL? That's what I wanted to see more of. And unfortunately for him, he broke his hand on Tuesday. And you can't do nothing about that. But when he was out on the field on Tuesday, I thought he looked really good, but he didn't get that full opportunity to answer some of those questions like we're talking about with a guy like Tyjae Spears.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you probably don't want to call him a riser just because they only did one practice. But at the end of the day, like he also played through a broken hand apparently for part of this practice. Like it didn't come out till after the practice that he had broken his hand. So showed some toughness there. I think the thing about him too that you hear so much good stuff about what he is, like the type of person he is, the type of player he is, on and off the field. Like he's like the most intense guy. He's a former quarterback, so he has like that versatility. He's played multiple positions, and it sounds like he will contribute on special teams. He'll do like anything, but the team asks him. He's that kind of guy. So just like what you hear about him, it makes it sound like he's going to go maybe a little bit higher than you think. It's kind of like it's a Miles Sanders type situation, not to the same extent where Sanders, I think was viewed as a top level prospect, but he played behind such a good running back that you never really get to see what he could do. And so, I think he probably didn't rise in a lot of guys' minds, but I think he's still probably going to go higher than people expect.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I think if we would have seen more of Roschon throughout the week, I think we could easily classify him as a riser, considering at least a small sample that we saw from the beginning, but I don't disagree, guys. But another highly touted guy that we saw talking to a ton of agents throughout the week, we know the pass game upside is there. Kenny McIntosh, I mean, the prowess is there in the receiving game. Danny, what did you see from him throughout the week, and how would you categorize him? Like, is it a stock up? Is he going down, or are we looking at another neutral situation here?
I think he had a good week. I mean, I didn't like focus in on him the entire time, but like when I was watching him, he like was making catches out of the backfield. He looks really, really smooth. He's built like a lead back. He's in Georgia. You always have these like committees that it's really kind of hard. Like you can't look at their stats and just say, oh, this guy's going to be whatever he is, because he's like playing such a heavy rotation with so many other, highly recruited guys. And so he's coming in with a little less fanfare, but like when I watch him run, he has a lot of burst. He can hit the home run. And he's extremely good in the passing game. At least he was, on tape. And I think he did a pretty good job of that this week. So to me, he was one of the guys that was most like excited to watch. And every time I did like zoom in on him, he looked good to me. And so I would consider him a riser. I think he's another guy like Roschon Johnson that could go on day 2 and surprise a little people and maybe even play a role in year 1 for a team that he lands with. So Kenny McIntosh to me he's a underrated talent because he didn't get the type of like volume that you'd expect from like a guy who's going to go on day 2.
Yeah, I like Kenny McIntosh. I thought he had a really solid week, and I think the one thing that we saw him leave early on the first day with the calf injury and then come back, he didn't look inhibited in any way by that injury from the first day. Now, we did see here was a cramp, so it sounds like it stands up because he looked good, fluid in all of his movement. I saw one run where he busted up the crease and he was gone. Like as soon as he saw daylight, he was gone. But any other guys at the running back position that you feel like we really got to bring up as risers or super notable here, Danny?
Eric Gray for me from Oklahoma, I think had a really good week. I mean, he's another guy that he's like Evan Hall, where if you look at him, he's just built like just a brick. Like he is really muscular, short, squat guy, but he's really explosive, really like twitchy in his movements. I wouldn't call him like a speedster as like an overall speed guy, but he's really twitchy, like, make guys miss in a phone booth type of guy. He's really good at that dead leg thing where he'll like kind of like hesitate and then explode one way or explode the other way, make guys miss. And so I think he showed up a lot. He caught the ball well. He had a couple of plays, I think, where he kind of like had to go up high and catch a ball, and he looked pretty good in those situations. So, he's not a guy, I don't know if he'll go on day 2. I think he might be more of like a 4th rounder. But to me, he was really impressive. And I think he's the type of guy who I'm just going to be rooting for because he's just like really fun to watch. I loved his tape before we watched the Senior Bowl. And he continually showed up for me, and just as a guy who's like flashing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't disagree with that at all, man. Like moving over to wide receivers, Thor, we're going to talk about your boy, the convert. I'm now a fan of Tank Dell. Come on, man. Spit the love letter.
Oh, well, Tank Dell was the most impressive receiver that we saw here. Now, I mean, like coming into this week, he's sort of the opposite of some of these other guys we're talking about, where Tank Dell's game, and Danny, you know where I'm going with this. His game so fits the exhibition all-star game, like practice ethos, where like it's going to be impossible for anybody to cover that guy one-on-one. It is in game situations, and it's sort of unfair to put him across, pick any of these defensive backs out here, and then you're like, you have to stick with Tank Dell in the open field for 5 seconds. Like, I don't know that any human being can do that. His movement's just stupid. It's like glitchy, like glitched in the Matrix, stupid. Like some of the moves that you see on tape where he just, like, guys would be flying by him and Tank's going full speed the other way. It's like, wait, what just happened? Stuff like that. We saw all of that here, but we more or less expected it. I think the thing that started to open some people's eyes, and Danny, maybe you can speak to this, the difference between Tank Dell and some of these other smaller receivers that we've come out, for me, like, for instance, Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell was a guy at Louisville where you could either throw him the funnel screens and then you'd watch him try to create with his speed after that, or you'd throw him the fly routes. But Tutu Atwell, between those two depths, did very little. And when he was coming out, it was like, was that scheme or was that anything to do with him, whatever? With Tank Dell, we don't have none of those questions. Tank Dell probably is not as straight line fast as Tutu Atwell. Few are, but he is a far better route runner. He has far better ball skills. He has far better understanding of what he's doing, better footwork. Like the whole gamut outside of the straight line speed thing, Tank Dell has them. And when you look through like the splits of Tank Dell's career at Houston over the last 3 years, the different sectors of the field where he was winning, I went back to look at this. Tank Dell, there was a season where at all 4 sectors of the field, he had a grade of 90 or above, PFF receiving grade. And then in the other 2 seasons, I think it was 3 out of the 4 sectors where he was 90 or above. Last year, the only one where he wasn't, it was behind the line of scrimmage. Because he had on one of those plays, he fumbled. And one of the other ones, they counted him with a drop, which just would tank the whole thing. But the rest of it was fabulous. Tutu Atwell, most of his career, it was 1 or 2 of those sectors. He only got to 3 once, 4 never.
Yeah, I totally remember that. Like watching his tape at Louisville, it was like either they throw him a screen or they throw it deep, and that's a big red flag, especially when you're 165 pounds, because I think that's what Tank Dell came in at. So, we were talking about this today. The 165-pound thing is like a huge red flag for me, but at the same time, you're absolutely right about the ways that they win and the styles that they play, because he was truly like turning guys around, like the expression "putting guys in a blender." Like they were like left flailing because they didn't know where he went at times, because he was so quick. He's so sudden. The suddenness is really what stands out. He's like more sudden than anybody on the field, and the corners are sudden. You know what I mean? Corners are very good athletes, and he was just leaving guys in the dust. So I think he was very impressive. Honestly, when I went back and was watching some of the tape from the first practice, there was literally plays where he was like catching the ball and the corner wasn't on the screen because it was just like he had left the guy in the dust. So I think there's always going to be a caveat when it comes to these types of players, because in these situations, one-on-ones, they're going to look good because they are that fast and that quick. But I think you're right that he's a good route runner. His technique as a route runner is solid. And he's not just a guy that's like fast. You know what I mean? Like, he's not just a fast guy. He has some technique, and he has good hands. He's competitive as hell.
And ball skills too, right?
Yeah.
For a smaller.
And so I'm becoming a believer, even though the 165 thing is like a big flashing like light at me. But I do think he has a place in the league just because, like, I'm honestly, like, Tutu's playing. He was playing too. He's not like a star necessarily, but I think he's probably a better prospect than Tutu was, just because of everything that you said. And so, you could see him go on day 2 and be productive because he's got those combination of route running and competitiveness. I think that he could win in the NFL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Tank can separate, and y'all talked about it. I mean, I think he plays bigger than his size, and to a little bit bigger size player, and really almost, I'm not going to say a Pandora's box prospect, because we had those with Tyson Bagent and other players here, but looking at Andrei, and I always butcher his last name, Thor, my struggles with this, but
Iosivas.
I said it right that time. I said it right that time.
Me and D-Bro have had some pronunciation classes here.
We have gone through the phonics and we have discussed this at length. But Danny, for a guy that had limited tape out there walking into this process, what did you see for him this week? Like, does he categorize in the the riser category today? Because I think he had a little bit of a rough day, but what did you see from him?
Yeah, it's kind of tough because I think he got unfortunately labeled as this year's potential Christian Watson before the Senior Bowl.
I'm
And
guilty.
obviously
I'm
that's
guilty
like
of this.
that's a high bar to hit because, Christian Watson was like a massive, massive riser in this process. And so to put him up to that, I think he did not do that, of course. But I do think there were moments where, and the first time I saw him, he was like running routes and he caught my eye because he's like pretty well built, but he's like pretty sudden, pretty fast. And then he caught like a really low pass at the sideline, and it was like a good catch, good hands technique. And I was like, who the heck is this guy in the orange helmet? I didn't even recognize the helmet. I was like, I don't know what Princeton's helmet is apparently. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like this guy's got something. I wouldn't say he had like an awesome week, but he did flash enough for me to be like pretty interested in where he's going to land. Obviously, he's got the deep speed, the runaway speed from somebody, and I think he's got a little bit of suddenness too. Like he's an all around athlete, the heptathlete. So we went through what a heptathlete is or whatever. It's like a whole bunch of different stuff. Like you're shot putting, you're doing a whole bunch of crap. So he's an all around athlete. He's not just like a straight line speed guy in my mind. So he's definitely got potential. I wouldn't say he's going to be like a second rounder necessarily, but I think he's an athletic, toolsy guy.
I mean, when you make the freak list, you've got some speed and some juice to burn for days. But off of Iosivas, one of the other guys that I feel like was a riser, we saw him catch a few deep patterns. I talked to him today. Super, super nice guy. Michael Wilson in the process. Danny, I'm curious your thoughts. I'm going to open this up to you first, but I know Thor's going to have plenty to say on the back end about Michael Wilson.
I mean, this is why I love the Senior Bowl because with several of these guys that we talked about today, and honestly, like they just weren't really on my radar coming in. I didn't really know who Michael Wilson was. He's played like 4, and 6 games in the last 3 years. Like he's been hurt almost the last 3 years, and we don't really know like what his deal was. And so he was not really on my radar coming in, but he was one of the most impressive guys all 3 days. He did have a really tough drop in the end zone, I believe, at the beginning of the practice today. But otherwise, he was a really good route runner, really sudden feet. Especially for his size, he was able to like number one get off the line really easily. Like he was shaking guys at the line, and then he was also able to like build up some speed down the field and put a guy on his hip and get by him and like separate late. I thought he did a great job. And I think he definitely improved his stock because as far as I'm concerned, like I didn't even know who he was, honestly, like before the week. I was like, who's this Michael Wilson guy? He keeps making catches. I was excited to see Higgins, and Michael Wilson like had a great week and Higgins struggled. So, this is why we do the Senior Bowl. I think this is the perfect example, the perfect guy to bring up because he went from completely off my radar to like someone I'm very interested in this draft. And he may have rose 3 or 4 rounds just based on how he played this week.
Absolutely. Thor, I know we were sitting right next to each other when he ran the deep post pattern, got open for the touchdown, and we're like, woo, who's this guy? But outside of the deep touchdown, I mean, what stuck out to you about Wilson this week?
He's skilled, and Danny made a lot of great points there. For a guy that's his size, over 6 foot and over 200 pounds, he's very smooth. Running the routes with the footwork. He knows what he's doing. He's got pretty good ball skills too. The drop rate was a little bit elevated this year, but you have to bake in the context of some of what a travesty Stanford's been the last couple of years. Like with all their guys, you sort of have to give them the contextual excuse or that whatever. But Wilson, Danny had brought this up as well. A part of the frustration with him, I cover college football in the fall, is I like Wilson whenever I seen him on the field the last couple of years, but it was always stop, start, on again, off again. Because he'd be on for a couple games, and he'd be back, and then he'd have a game where he'd have like 9 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. It's like, oh, Michael Wilson, and then he would have another minor injury, and he'd be out for 2 weeks, and then he'd come back, and it'd be like a 4-catch game. Then he might pop off again. Then he might have another minor injury. It was just all stop, start within this offensive system that was just awful for everybody involved. but like whenever Michael Wilson played and was fully healthy, invariably he was the best receiver on the field and one of the best players on the field. For a guy that big that moves that well, that runs routes like he does, this guy is going to be a riser. I think right now with where he is, he's going to be a draft day value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think he's a former 4-star guy, so it's not like he came out of nowhere. I just think it was, like you said, he just didn't have any consistency in college, and he hasn't played very many games lately. So he just was not a buzzy prospect before this week, and I think he's going to come out of it with a ton of buzz because everybody I talked to was like, he looks really good.
1,000%.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think Wilson, he opened my eyes. I mean, I looked at him on deeper routes walking into the process, and my question was, can he get open? Does he have the short area agility to get open on underneath routes? And we saw him flash that as well this week. But looking at all these different prospects, if you're loving all of our coverage for these guys, you got to get into the 2023 NFL Draft Guide. Head over to FantasyPros.com. We're going to be covering all these 2023 prospects, all the college guys this year. And all you got to do to access this is get a premium Fantasy Pros sub. I mean, look, this is what you need for Dynasty Leagues. We're going to have more content before the 2023 NFL Draft. So again, FantasyPros.com, look for the draft guide. It's going to be lit. Danny, I know you're a busy guy. I know you got your own things you got to work on before it's time for Beats tonight, my friend. But before we get you out of here, Jayden Reed, a guy that I was not that high on walking into the week. I will give it up. Has speed. I looked at him as being a Z receiver and a stretch, but I think he had a really good week. But I don't know what you saw from your chair in the stadium.
He, to me, was maybe the overall top receiver of the week. I think he just looked so good, so explosive, so electric. He's another guy that could easily get off the line. He's just so quick. And unlike the Tank Dell, and I thought Trey Tucker from Cincinnati had a good week too, but unlike those two guys, I think he's a little just more solidly built. His body control was really, really good. He's just never felt like he was off balance. You see some guys running routes, and especially when you see it in real life, their body control and their foot control just isn't very good. They're just a little bit off balance, or they're too easily pushed off their route. They're too easily sort of just shoved out of the way. And he was very just in control. I would say just a controlled, very fast, very sudden player. And so I was very impressed with him. He made a couple of big plays. He offers some special teams value. I believe he's a returner too. And so, I think he just really raised his stock this week. He looked really good out there. And I know that he was one of the more buzzy players too. Everybody I talked to was, just raving about Jayden Reed. So he's another guy who I think could get out and come in from day 3 and break into day 2 if he continues on this trajectory, because he looked really good to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, his name was one of the first that everybody brought up throughout the week. The more we saw him just getting open at will. But Thor, what did you think on Reed? I mean, was it the speed? Was the route precision? Because to me, it was the nuance in his routes. But I got to get your thoughts on what stood out to you the most about Reed this week.
That he's better than I thought coming in. I mean, some of these guys that impress, I was thinking that they might impress. And so I wasn't as surprised. Reed, he was flying under my radar, at least. Some other people might have had him higher coming in. But the first thing that jumped out, Danny's talking about, it's the movement. It's not just the speed. Danny brought up the body control, which sometimes you don't think about it like that. But, you have that. You have the agility in the open field. He obviously knows how to run a route. And for one of these receivers that's a little bit on the shorter end, beneath 6 feet or whatever, that's a guy that can make contested catches. He did it on tape. We saw it here too. Well, there's a lot of reps where he was shaking people, but he can also make really nifty catches. He's definitely a guy that helped his stock this week.
Yeah, I think he was a massive riser. I mean, it's not even arguable that you could put him up in the top 3 of guys that helped themselves the most this week. But Danny, appreciate you stopping by the stream, man. I love chopping up prospects with you on avenues like this, man. Love the content, dude. So we really appreciate you stopping by here for Fantasy Pros, man.
Absolutely, anytime. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Danny. We'll see you at Beats in a couple hours.
Yeah, I was going to say, first drink's on me, Danny.
See you in a bit. So, all right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, brother.
Thor, I know it's hard to press on after the illustrious Danny Kelly stops by and
Yeah, love
gives us
Danny.
his thought, but we got more players to talk about, so
Yeah.
everybody stay tuned, stay with us. Puka Nacua, we loved him before we came to the Senior Bowl, dude, and I know he wasn't there. I mean, we've heard a lot of different swirling things around him, but did he live up to our pre-Senior Bowl hype?
Well, for the day we saw him, yeah. I would love to know, like, because I haven't seen. I don't know if someone's put it out. You and I have been at practice or writing or whatever. But like, he left after Tuesday, and I don't think he got injured. So it seems like he pulled himself out of the event because he had heard that his sort of draft stock was solidified, which I'm cool with. Like, I mean, you're here. It's like a job application process, but like at the point where you have reached, you're gonna it's like when you get the sale, don't keep talking. And I think Puka Nacua got the sale on Tuesday, and he's like, later.
His agent's like, you did enough. We're good. We're gravy.
We
get
see
up
it every
here.
year. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he showed it. Yeah.
I mean, basically, if you want to give comps to this, he's kind of like last year's Alec Pierce. I know Alec Pierce left with a injury, but second round grade. Not saying that we're going to see Puka get that high, but if he's doing good things on the outside, then what do you really have left to prove here at Senior Bowl? But we talked about a lot of wide receivers here. The tight ends didn't get a lot of love, or at least a ton of love from us and other people around the industry. I think we look at this as a solid group, but Payne Durham is a name that I heard coming up constantly throughout the week from various scouts, other guys around the industry. What did you see from Payne?
Well, the first couple of days, not a ton. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes when they're catching your eye, it's because they're doing something bad. He sort of was nondescript for me first couple of days. Today, he was one of the most impressive players on the field. I mentioned with Danny before the catch he had in the back of the end zone from Haener in traffic, where Durham's helmet pops off, but he holds onto the ball. And then his teammates were going absolutely ballistic. I mean, the crowd there was, lots of oohs and ahs, but it jacked people up. It was a heck of a play. And it wasn't the only sort of circus contested catch he made today. The ball skills and the receiving utility, that's what you're sort of hanging the hat of his evaluation on. You saw how well he worked the past couple of years with Aiden O'Connell and Purdue and the Jeff Brom system overall. Brom's now left for Louisville, but Brom made good use of his tight ends. There was the kid a couple of years ago that went to the Rams who had the dropsy prop, Hopkins or whatever. Every
Bryson
year,
Hopkins.
Yeah, every year Purdue had the tight ends or whatever, and they had a couple good receivers they sent to the NFL as well. But Durham, that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see that receiving utility. I didn't see as much of it the first 2 days. Today it sort of jumped off the field. So he becomes a riser just by definition because he impressed with the ball skills today.
Yeah, I think Durham had a really, really solid day this week. But we've so far, we've given a lot of love to risers and guys that we think either had solid weeks, didn't hurt their stocks. One of the guys at the top of the show we talked about was Jaren Hall, who's been erratic. And that could still be a kind way to phrase this, Thor. But any more on Jaren Hall and any other quarterbacks? Because honestly, we talked this with Danny. Underwhelming group, but anybody that stuck out to you where you were like, I think that you probably hurt yourself more than helped?
Yeah, well, Jaren Hall had the awful week. I don't know if I'd say nightmare, but maybe just whatever the next tier above that would be. As D-Bro knows, I changed my comp of Jaren Hall this week to Shea Patterson after taking in his work for whatever that's worth.
Oh, man.
As far as the other guys, Tyson Bagent, Clayton Tune for me was every day he was just hitting it down the fairway. It was nothing crazy one way or the other. It was just sort of Clayton Tune's game from tape or whatever. Maybe he was a little bit overly conservative. Maybe he's hiding his, lack of arm strength a little bit. It's more or less just what you'd expect. Bagent, we leave 3 days of practice. I still don't know what to make of that kid. What I can tell you for sure, he looks like he belongs, and by physical ability, he absolutely belongs. His right arm, it's big league caliber. But the consistency was all over the place. And with him, there's accuracy issues that can come and go. Like he'll throw a dime or two, and then on the next throw, he'll be like, 15 yards off to the left, or overshoot someone by, they need a ladder to catch the thing or whatever. And that's something we saw on tape a little bit as well. Debra, I know you had talked to me about this, and we have sort of limited tape on him because it's not like all the D2, all 22 you can get or whatever. But from like what we had seen coming in, the accuracy was one of those things where it's like a tangible on-field thing, because like other things you bring up with him, it's like workarounds with his eval. It's like, okay, he's playing at a lower level of competition. He's in this gimmicky offense that was totally built. It wasn't just tailored to him. They explicitly built the offensive scheme around Badgin's skills, but a lot of times it was just the first read, and then it would allow him to show that the arm talent that he has. If that guy was open, right, he'd just rip it to the guy, whatever sector of the field it was. But when he wasn't, like sometimes that's when you'd see the decision making, or more to the point, the accuracy. If he's moved off his spot or whatever. Someone we were sitting with, Debra, I remember they made a great point. So I'm not going to steal it, but I don't remember who it was, so I can't give them credit. But they had made the point that when Badgin's in rhythm, the accuracy is really good. Like when you see him get to the top of his drop and he knows where he's going with the ball, and then drives off that back foot. Like a lot of times the ball comes out with smoke on it and hits the receiver in the hands. It's like the other instances when that is not the case, then that's when the accuracy can start to come or go. So for me, Badgin is not a riser. He's also not a faller though, because it's basically exactly what we thought coming in, which he's still sort of a Pandora's box, but we know he's got the arm for it. We just don't know if he has the accuracy or the consistency.
Yeah, and okay, so I don't want to get hit with anything off camera right now. Our own Chrissy Freud, who's down here at Senior Bowl crushing coverage. I don't want to get hit with anything. I do have to correct both of us. It's Tyson Bagent, okay? We've heard that also.
Oh, Bagent like agent.
Yes. And so Badgent like pageant,
Yeah, I was again, like sort of doing the French baguette, sort of like that. But Bagent like agent. Okay, we got that. We'll be good.
So one last, or a few other guys we got to hit on here for Senior Bowl week, but I don't think it's even arguable, Thor. One of the guys that there were various opinions around the industry about this player walking into Senior Bowl week, but you can make a really good case that he could have been the biggest faller from Senior Bowl week. Chase Brown. Oh, it's been a rough go. It's been a tough scene, Thor, but describe it for the people at home.
It was ugly. Chase Brown had a really poor week. There was people that came into this week higher on Chase Brown. D-Bro, you and I were not two of those people, but we're certainly not going to take a victory lap here, because I think Chase Brown was even worse than you and I expected him to be, and we weren't the biggest fans of him in comparison to some of these other backs in the class. But like the knocks on him or the things you were concerned about coming in, it's like, what are you going to do with the guy on third down? Because Illinois rarely threw to him. When they did, he was just a dump off guy. And my eyes on film, it looked kind of clunky. And then he wasn't good in pass pro in college. So it's like, well, if neither of those things change, he's just flat not usable on passing downs. And then his rushing utility, it's not like he's a super duper gifted running back. You brought up this point several times of he doesn't really break tackles. But like his entire utility, it's winning like once he gets into the second level and the third level, and then trying to run away from people. Like that's how he piled up a lot of his stats this past year at Illinois. Mm-hmm. But it's like he doesn't break tackles. So like at the NFL level, how often do you see the running back get into the second, third level without being touched? Number one, and then number two, that both you and I had this question of like, is Chase Brown really a burner? Because in our eyes, it didn't really look like that, even though, again, he did have the explosive runs last season, but we didn't think he was like this speed merchant that some other people had sort of forwarded him as. So that was like, the context of like where D-Bro and I were at coming into this week. As far as the third down stuff, I think you could just take that out of your mind now. Chase Brown proved that he cannot do the third down stuff. He gets ragdolled in the pass pro. Like he can't even put up like reps where it's like respectable. It's like,
Thor, he was a matador. I mean, basically all week he got down in the stance and it was just, ole, ole, like they're going past him without hardly any resistance.
It was Ezekiel Elliott snapping the ball through his legs. That was Chase Brown in pass pro. And then as a receiver, arguably was worse. Because at least in pass pro, you can be like, well, I mean, how many running backs are actually good in pass pro? But in the NFL level, especially if you're sort of this 1-0 runner, you have to provide some, especially if you're not going to block, you have to provide at least some baseline.
You have to be a special early down runner to hold that type of role.
Yeah, and we saw multiple backs out here that not only run the fluid, snappy routes out of the backfield, but also, can be lined up in the slot or wide. I mean, we had several skilled guys here. McIntosh, Hall, Tyjae Spears showed that he had receiving chops. That but like you sort of go down the line. But then when it was like Chase Brown's turn, like there was just like simple just dump off. So like everything on the field I couldn't do, like whatever. But like the dump, like I easily, any of us could have caught it, whatever. Like those were clanging off of Chase Brown's hands.
Yep.
Like all, the only thing like from a passing down perspective it's like, well, you could try to dump it off to him and then have him like create with his speed after that. But like, I don't even think his hands are good enough for that. And it wasn't just the hands manifesting there. We saw him fumble multiple times. He didn't look necessarily comfortable on a lot of his rushing reps. And then the one thing, again, the strength that like sort of carries the day of his eval, the ability to get into the second and third levels. We didn't see that this week. Like he doesn't have the lateral agility as some of these guys. He doesn't break tackles like some of these. Like, how is he going to free himself if he's not playing behind the most dominant offensive line in the NFL? Right? Like, so it's like
he's going to need offensive line. I mean, basically, like he looks like a guy that can get what's blocked. What was the adage you whispered in my ear earlier today, Thor? If you need 3 yards, what?
Oh, well, the old Leroy Horde. If you need if you need 1 yard, I'll get you 3 yards. If you need 5 yards, I'll get you 3 yards.
That's. I mean, we could just rename it with Chase Brown. I mean, it's sad, and I don't want to pile on the guy. He had a tough week in all facets and all these different things that you were looking for his game to really be hallmarks. And he talked about it in our interview about wanting to be a weapon in the passing game. But it's like, if you have problems pass protecting and blocking, you get blown out of his shoes. And then when he's out running routes, he had linebackers in his back pocket on every one of those one-on-ones.
Zero separation.
They were just like, pimp. Like, you're not getting these targets.
Like, he doesn't know what he's doing running routes. Like, I don't even know if it's an athletic thing. Like, it's just not like some of these guys. Like, even with Spears today, we didn't see him, like, because you could give him the same excuse that you gave for Brown. We didn't see him out receiving as much in college as a guy like McIntosh, as a guy like Hall, whatever. But like Spears, you saw him just like deke guys out of their shoes. Like I said, break ankles, or he'd be running one way, the defender would be flying the other way, and then now he's open, whatever. Chase Brown does not have that understanding, much less that agility. It's just like he doesn't really understand the assignment. That's not even the most like sort of depressing thing about it. It's like, even as a dump off guy, which you're like, well, you could at least be, if there's nobody around you, we could dump it off to you. Multiple times this week, just as a dump off option where he's wide open, ball clangs off his hands and hits the turf. Like, I just don't think there's any hope for him as a passing down guy whatsoever. And then the running game thing, again, how is he going to get to the second and third level in the NFL? Yep. He's not a world-class sprinter. He does not break tackles. He doesn't have like extra worldly agility. Like, how is it going to happen for him there? I'm really down on Chase Brown after what I saw. And like we mentioned, like you and I were not fans coming in, and he went below our bar.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all, man. And we have a question coming in from Twitter from Jerry Bussman, hearkening a little bit back to the quarterbacks. Max Duggan, is he getting drafted? And what's your prediction if so? Thor, where do you think he goes?
We got to get Kelly back up here, because I think we had this exact conversation in the car, like coming back for practices.
We did.
Yeah. And I'll just recite what I said there. I think he's going 6th or 7th round. I don't think he goes any earlier than that. I do think he gets drafted in one of those 2 rounds, but like the issues with his game, they're prevalent enough where I just don't see how a team could draft him higher. And Debro, like you had the best take on this. The processor for Max Duggan, it just churns sort of like a meat grinder. Like, it's like, you don't know if it's like, does he have bad vision? Like, does he not see the field well? Or is it just that he doesn't trust what he's seeing? Either way, whether it's the chicken or the egg, He's just a beat or two behind, and he needs to see that receiver is not only open, but is like taking a step or two. And then now Max Duggan can rip it. And the kid, look, he's athletic. He has arm strength. Like, it's not too dissimilar from Jaren Hall. He's not quite as, physically gifted as Jaren Hall, but it's sort of along the same line of continuum. But like, and I do think that Max Duggan is more, or at least this week we saw was more accurate than Jaren Hall. And he more or less made better decisions. But it's like, if you can only read one side of the field and you can't go to the other one, and your internal clock is going like half speed from the defense, like when you're projecting him to the NFL, that's just where it gets a bridge too far for me, even though I concede that he has the NFL tools.
Yeah, I agree on all points on Duggan. Like, he looks like he's a step behind his progressions. It's really get to one. Okay, is one open? One. Force the ball to one. Okay, next snap.
Or I'm taking off.
To two, gone. He's going to scramble. And some reps, it's just literally, okay, I'm going to stare down one. That's not open. Okay, 5 seconds later, scramble. Yep. Like, that's really the Duggan processing. But I did bring up one thing to our colleague Mike Mayer, who I know is a diehard Eagles fan, that you saw Duggan operate a RPO-heavy scheme at TCU. Yeah. So if you're looking like, okay, does he get taken in the last round, and what is a good fit for him to help his transition to the NFL? It would be the Philadelphia Eagles. RPO-heavy, they use a lot of those concepts with Jalen Hurts, but are you going to, like, I'm not saying he's going to be a rushing asset at the next level, but what I'm saying is, in that type of scheme, RPOs, simple reads, some of the things they did for Jalen Hurts to ease him into it last year, that could be a possible home round 6, round 7 priority UDFA for Max Duggan. I mean, we saw Carson Strong last year, landed with Philly, didn't stick. Could they go back to that well again this year? But quickly, 2 other guys that we got to mention here.
Well, I was just going to say, it amuses me because every single day here, and almost twice a day, Mayer was trying to fit one of these other quarterbacks into the backup job with the Eagles. So like before, like who's like Malik Cunningham? Can you imagine Cunningham Eagles jersey with the quarter? It's like yeah. Every day he was going through to do it. So I guess Max Duggan is Mayer's flavor of the day.
Max Duggan, future Philadelphia Eagle. We're gonna see Mayer pop some champagne. It's gonna be a party.
Yeah.
But before we get out of here, Thor, 2 other guys we got to bring up here. That honestly, I think that we're putting both of these guys in. Just punch your tickets. Put them on the struggle bus. It's gonna happen. Ronnie Bell is the first guy that comes to mind for me. I think that you're looking at a guy that, no familial relations that I know of, but he looks a lot to me like David Bell trying to play the outside. It's a struggle. He's stiff, no separation. He's got any hope in the NFL and to stick on a practice squad, earn his way up. It's got to be in the slot, but am I wrong? Am I drinking too much of the David Bell Kool-Aid here?
Oh, it was a bad week for David Bell. If you're thinking about
Ronnie
or Ronnie Bell, yeah.
Sorry, they're so comparable. Excuse me.
Yeah, well, no, and Elbert Bell was in my head too. You like when you brought up the Bell thing, it was like all the different Bells. But no, like there was multiple problems, and I will say as a caveat, today he was better than he was in the first 2 days. He actually made a couple plays, but the first 2 days in particular had trouble separating from defensive backs, and then also on the reps where he got throwing the ball, his hands were wildly inconsistent. He might have had the worst hands of any of the receiving group in those first 2 days, including some pretty freebie throws. Like, we're not talking all these ones where, like, contested catchers downfield.
No, like 5-yard outs, and he has a step or two in the corner.
Yeah, and he needed a big day today. I probably won't go as far as saying big day, but he performed way better today than he did in the other 2. Again, that's you're getting over a very low bar. But, yeah, it wasn't the best week for him overall. Salvaged a little bit today, but for me, he's one of the wide receiver losers.
Yeah, and we're talking about low bar players. I mean, I think that if it's not Chase Brown having a tough week from this, walking out of this, I think one of the names in a lot of different articles, he's going to make ours, that'll be live on FantasyPros.com later tonight. You got to be checking that out, going to the landing page where it wraps up all of our content for the entire week. that name's got to be Elijah Higgins. And
Oh,
I'm messing up his name, Thor, but Elijah Higgins, we saw him move from wide receivers to tight ends today in the groupings, which I think is a plus for him. But I think the overall feeling about his week was, it was rough, man.
yeah, I think Elijah Higgins, he came into this week, he wanted to like prove to evaluators and the onlookers, like, I'm more of like like a Chase Claypool. Like I'm like
Mm-hmm.
like a big, like a big starting receiver in the NFL that looks like more athletic than my size or whatever, and I have the really good ball skills. But he didn't prove that. Nah. No,
No.
like he wasn't separating from anyone. He looked like his feet were in quicksand the whole time. Like he was sort of moving at half speed. Like I mean, like in the team session, he didn't give his quarterbacks anything to look at. And of course, he got thrown the
Mm-hmm.
ball, in the one-on-ones. But like again, zero separation. Like every catch point was contested, and his hands didn't look the best either. Like he looked out of place as a receiver, even in an exhibition where it's like we're NFL guys, not in an NFL game, but like in an exhibition of prospects going towards it. He looked out of place with the receivers. So today early on, and D-Bro, you and I were sitting next to each other. We sort of was like, Higgins is with the tight end group. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were down for it because at least to our eyes, the first 2 days he had proven I am not an NFL receiver. So then
Yep.
it becomes at his size, which is unique. What do you measure as like 6'3", 235 or 240, like
Yeah.
somewhere in there? Like, okay, if we know that he's not an NFL receiver, then it's like, what does he become now? Is he a big slot? Is he an H back? Is he, could he be like a tight end dish? Like whatever.
Well,
Uh,
my comp was Roschon Johnson. I looked at him from the very beginning and I said, this guy has a shot at hanging on an NFL roster, even any type of upside. If you want to sniff upside and opportunity, I think he needs to move to tight end. And we talked about this even before we got down there. I was like, I hope that we see him work in with the tight ends. And we
yeah.
saw that on day 3, which was good to see because it's not just us having this hope for Higgins and any type of like glimmer of hope for his NFL prospects, but NFL evaluators wanted to see him in that type of role as well.
Well, for sure. Yeah. And I think you and I wanted to see him at tight end, like coming into the week because we are
The whole
sort of,
time.
we, we had the supposition he wasn't going to be able to handle the boundary thing. And again, it's like, what are you going to take a victory lap on that? But that in baseball parlance, he failed down the spectrum. And so by the time they were working him at tight end, it wasn't because it was like, oh, he's this chess piece and he can do all these different things, handle all these things. It was, no, he categorically failed at proving that he could be an NFL receiver. That dream to me is over. Now it becomes the rest of his process. At least he has time now to try to pick up the pieces of, now we got to start trying to bulk up. Now we're going to be at our pro day. We're going to have to do more blocking drills. We're going to have to maybe line up in line, and different stuff like that. His whole process, I think, changed because of this week, because of the struggles the first 2 days at wide receiver. This whole thing, his whole focus now. Whereas before, coming into literally, he was telling people like, I want to go out there and prove like, I'm this sort of like unicorn type receiver, at this size, whatever. You're not that, pal. You're not. You're maybe a tight end. Hopefully, like, you're gonna have to prove that. Now we don't know that. Maybe an H back or like whatever, but like you're not a boundary receiver in the NFL. So it's time to pick up the pieces for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see, but, we want to see these players succeed, the range of outcomes of their possible NFL careers coming up. And I think a lot of those things are on display for Senior Bowl. And you see players either kind of wilt under the pressure of learning installs and shorthand and all these different types of things on a compressed week. But I think it's all this type of insight that you really get if you're a dynasty gamer, if you're looking at NFL, just like you want NFL content. I think all those things are extremely important, and the Senior Bowl is a great window into all these players. And I know that we're going to quickly wrap this thing up. I mean, because we got to get back to the desk and put out more content covering the Senior Bowl for everybody for the rest of the week on FantasyPros.com. So again, head to the landing, head to all the content. We're going to have content for day one. We're going to have more stuff coming out through the weekend into Monday. Thor and I are going to have a recap podcast. So look for that on iTunes. We're going to run through everything, all of our final thoughts, because I still think we need a little bit of time to let some of this marinate, Thor, walking out of the week. But again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into this live stream. With a special guest, Danny Kelly. Thank you to him. But appreciate you all. Tune in, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We love y'all. We're out of here.